Now, welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this week we'll be continuing our quest to determine the best Clone Wars story arcs and what position they fall into. And so this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll for the Fives or Clone Conspiracy arc. Before I then read and respond to some of your comments, I'll also once again be showing off the artwork that's been sent into me lately. But before we get to all that, you can already head down and respond to my pinned comment below with your nomination for which arc we should do next, or give a thumbs up if the one you'd like to see is already listed there. As usual, whichever one gets the most votes in the next 24 hours or so will be our winner and the one we cover next. Okay, that said, let's get to the results for the Fives arc now, where we'll see that 76% of people gave it 5 stars and thought it was amazing. Another 19% then gave it 4 stars and thought it was good. 3% gave it 3 stars and thought it was about average, which then left 1% to give it 2 stars, and a final 1% to give it just 1. And so when we do all the math here, the Fives or Clone Conspiracy arc ends up with an average score of 4.68 stars, which puts it into 3rd place overall and just a few hundredths of a point behind both the Siege of Mandalore and the Ahsoka Walks Away arc, which is right about where I thought this one would finish, just behind those two and comfortably among the best few arcs of the whole series. Okay, so time now to move on to your comments, but first, let me once again say thank you to everyone who votes, comments, sends in artwork, and watches the videos. It's all truly appreciated. And so let's begin, as we always do, with the top-rated comment, which this time came to us from It's High Noob, who said, "Maul was just like Fives. No one believed him until it was too late." And I never really thought about it that way, but those two do have quite a bit in common when it comes to knowing the truth, but having nobody listen to them. Not that Ahsoka was really ever going to listen to and trust Maul, but Rex and Anakin really should have taken Fives a bit more seriously than they did. Still, it's an interesting observation, and I certainly think it's a fun what-if story in both of these cases. What if Rex and Anakin had believed Fives and looked into it more? And what if Ahsoka believed Maul and joined with him, and somehow together they were able to stop Anakin's turn to the dark side, and or Order 66 altogether? And speaking of not believing Fives, let's get to this comment from Awkwin1201, who said, "I had to give it just 4 stars, because while it was a great story, when connected to the bigger picture, it truly helps illustrate that the Jedi Council was full of idiots." Starting here and running up to the end of Season 6, they straight up know they were being led to slaughter. The Chips, the shady Kamino clones, Dooku literally creating the clone army for them. That alone should have had the Jedi immediately stepping away from the clones. So the episode had a great storytelling, but at the cost of making the Jedi look like absolute morons. We also had this one from Peekapoo, who simply said, "When a clone outsmarts the entire Jedi Council." And really here, I think the only explanation we can give for the Jedi failing to put it all together is pure arrogance. And even that doesn't explain how they failed to put, well, pretty much anything together, and why they fell so perfectly into Palpatine's trap, why a Sith Lord was able to operate right under their nose for years, and only at the bitter end did they even seem to start suspecting Palpatine of anything. So I will agree that, Shroud of the Dark Side or not, the Jedi are maybe just a bit too oblivious when it comes to all of this. Alright, moving on now, we have this comment from Meli Icho, who said, "It hurt the whole time. I wanted everyone to believe him, because I knew if they didn't, the Jedi would all be killed, betrayed by the ones they trusted, and the survivors hunted down. In respect of how it made me feel, and how I mourned for Fives, I give this arc its show of character development and its storytelling ability an A+. We also then had this comment from Aydan Lopez, who said, "This arc is so amazing because of the great tension it creates. Even if we know how the story will end, we always have a little bit of hope that things will be different this time around. This arc also elevated Fives from great to fan favorite. His death will always be remembered." Then also this comment from Grady Daniels, who said, "I've never wanted a fictional character to succeed more than I did for Fives. It also shows an evil side of the Kaminoans that makes you hate them." We also had this comment from Dennis Sachamen, who said, "I found it amazing because you already know that it ends in the Jedi not figuring it out in time, but you are still extremely excited to see what happens and how close they get." Certainly one of the best and worst parts about this arc is you know how it has to end, you know that no one is going to believe him and Order 66 is still going to happen, and yet you're rooting for Fives to somehow stop it anyway. That somehow this will be an alternate reality where everything works out the way you hope for. And I think this arc pulls off that helpless, impending sense of doom or failure that you know is coming really, really well. And it's hard to swallow when it does actually happen, when Fives dies and no one, not even Anakin and Rex, seem to believe him. And it's kind of unfortunate that, I feel at least, the prequels didn't manage to pull this off better with Anakin, that we didn't watch those movies dreading the fact that we know he is going to fall to the dark side and become Darth Vader, that we weren't hoping against hope that it wouldn't happen somehow. And though I do think the Clone Wars perhaps pulls that feeling off a little bit better than the prequels did in regards to Anakin, it still doesn't manage to nail that feeling that this single story arc did with Fives. Alright, and next up here we have this comment from Buenos Noches, who said, "It explains perfectly why the clones betrayed the Jedi in Revenge of the Sith. I sincerely love what the Clone Wars did for the soldiers of the Republic, the real victims of the conflict." Next then we had this comment from Jessica A, who said, 5 stars. This arc, along with Siege of Mandalore and Umbara, always hits hardest for me. In Revenge of the Sith, I assumed that Order 66 was something only unfeeling soldiers would carry out without question, but the show took this generic army and turned them into real characters. So I think the inhibitor chip explanation was needed, although I know some dislike it. It was interesting to see Tup's reaction after the fact, and it made me wonder how other clones felt afterwards. This arc saw the end of my personal favorite clone, Fives. When I first watched it, I hoped in spite of myself that he would survive, but sadly, he knew too much. I still find his death the most heartbreaking scene in the show, and it may also be the first time I actually hated Palpatine for being so evil. I'm likely a bit biased by my love for the clones, especially Fives, but this is one of my favorites in the series. We also here had this comment from JScars8, who said, "Truly a heartbreaking story. Fives' death scene is one of the few times in the Clone Wars that I actually almost teared up. Plus, the concept of inhibitor chips is incredible. My biggest complaint in Revenge of the Sith was that it seemed a little unlikely for Cody to turn on his general, yet this explains everything. Clones are the most tragic characters in all of Star Wars." Also had this comment from Mandalorian 637, who said, "This arc filled in the question of why the clones would turn on the Jedi so easily and perfectly." Okay here, so I know a lot of people will always bring up how in episode 2 we're told that the clones are totally obedient, taking any order without question. And if you just watch the movies, I think that explanation works well enough for Order 66, and why they followed it without hesitation, mainly because we don't ever really get to know the clones at all. They feel a little different than the droids on the other side of the battle, to be honest with you. So the fact that they would just follow this order without a second thought, even if it is to kill the Jedi, just kind of works. Problem is, if you've watched Clone Wars, Order 66 no longer makes a whole lot of sense as presented in the movie, that they would just blindly follow it without second guessing it for even a second. I mean, one of the great things about the show is it turns clones from, again, pretty much mindless drones, as seen in the movies, into not only actual characters, but actual people. Even if you just watch the Umbara arc, you'd no longer believe that every clone would just do exactly as they're told without even a second thought, especially when it comes to Order 66 and slaughtering their Jedi generals. And I kind of like to believe that, though bred to follow any order that was their initial programming, if you will, they learned to overcome it from their Jedi generals who, in most cases, treated them like people rather than drones, which is the simple beauty of the Umbara arc. Here comes Pong Krell to take over the 501st, and he treats them like they're expendable drones. But thanks to the way Anakin has treated them, they're again essentially overcoming or have overcome their programming, and now see themselves as the Jedi do, as living, breathing individuals who deserve to be treated as such. And so by not having some sort of explanation for why they would follow Order 66, and in this case it was chips in their brains, you destroy all that development from the Clone Wars. In the end, they would have just been mindless drones anyway, who didn't question orders despite what Clone Wars had shown us. And that just doesn't make sense at all after seeing them gain a type of mental freedom and independence because of the way the Jedi had treated them. It doesn't make sense that they'd simply kill them without any second thoughts or remorse afterwards. I just can't see Cody immediately ordering to open fire on Obi-Wan after all we'd seen them go through together in the Clone Wars. Alright, and moving along now, we have this comment from FatherShiv, who said, "My favorite arc. At least his discovery wasn't forgotten, as he saved Ahsoka and Rex. 5 stars." And that really is the silver lining in this difficult arc. We all knew as we watched that Fives would ultimately fail somehow, but everything he went through and tried to do wasn't completely in vain. He planted the seed of doubt in Rex's head that allowed him to hesitate just enough, which saved Ahsoka's life. And that moment when Rex tells her to find Fives is just one of the best in the entire series. Alright, and next up here we have this comment from Pluto Returns, who said, "That moment just before Tup dies where he speaks about the mission. The mission, the one in our dreams that never ends, the one in our dreams." And the way all the clones in the room shift slightly, as if you can see their expressions through their helmets, like they know what Tup is talking about, but they can't quite grasp it. That's some of the best foreshadowing ever right there. At the same time, it foreshadows Five's death to come in days, and Order 66 to come in months. And that is a fantastic moment where it does feel like you can actually see under their helmets, as you said, and see that uncomfortable look on their face because they all know exactly what he's talking about, even if they can't quite articulate it. And again, it shows that this was not something they just followed because they follow any and all orders without question, but carrying out Order 66 had been ingrained into their very being from the start. It is both fantastic foreshadowing and further explains why they did what they did, and why they were unable to resist it. The true tragedy of the clones was they were created simply to be mindless drones that would kill the Jedi when the time was right, yet it was the Jedi who helped them become far more than mindless clones. Okay, and now time for just a few final comments before wrapping this up, starting with this one from Arc1409, who said, "It was really interesting to see Fives uncover Order 66 and Palpatine's plan to create the Empire. This arc has great action, great moments, and also gives more insight about the lore of Order 66. The ending is really captivating to watch because the audience knows that Palpatine told Fives everything, but because the Kaminoans drugged him, all the other characters think he went insane. Personally, I think all the arcs with Domino Squad are great, and this one was no different." We also then had this comment from Infinite Omega, who said, "5 stars for the man named Fives. His name was ironic, as even though he called himself a number, he spent his life showing he was anything but." Also had this comment from Jake Barnes, who said, "This arc was great and it really tied the Clone Wars and the prequels together." Then this comment from Mitchell White, who said, "5 has to get 5 stars, just like poetry, it rhymes." And finally here this comment from Kenna Hughes, who said, "This arc rivals the Umbar arc for my favorite in the show. The whole time I was watching it, I was on the edge of my seat. I so desperately wanted to see 5 succeed because we all knew that he was absolutely right. It was also a great way to explain why the clones would just blindly execute Order 66 in Revenge of the Sith, even though they were shown throughout the Clone Wars to be very close with their Jedi generals. Five's death is also the first moment in the show that made me actually cry, although Ahsoka leaving was close. Another thing I love about this arc is how it shows some of the best of what the Clone Wars is about, humanizing the clones. When Fives is talking to AZI-3, he tells him how important names are to clones, and he is constantly reminding those around him, as well as us the audience, that the clones are not just another number, they are living beings. Overall, a fantastic arc that shows off some of the best of what the Clone Wars is, an easy 5 stars for me. Beautifully and perfectly said, and I don't really have much more to add to that before closing out this video. Again, what I love about this arc is that, in the long run, everything Fives went through wasn't in vain. Everything we went through while watching it wasn't in vain. It was because of Fives and uncovering the truth that Rex was able to hesitate when Order 66 was given, which allowed Ahsoka that extra second she needed, and then she would go on to save Rex, and it was all thanks to Fives. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think of this arc, or what you think of what I or anyone else had to say about it here in this video. You can also go and nominate or vote for which arc we do next, and do take note that we only have a couple left since I'm mainly trying to get a top 10 here. Either way, head down to the comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.